While Adidas have been busy pushing their flashy new releases, you may have missed that about a month ago, the brand actually refreshed their simple and more understated Copa Gloro line. And this update comes in the form of the Copa Gloro 2 that I have here. Now, I was a fan of the previous version of this model, so in this video, we're gonna go over all the features of this new version, talk about what's changed, and then hopefully find out whether or not this will be a good boot for you. And of course, at the end of the video, if you're interested in picking up a pair of the new Copa Gloro 2 or any of the other boots that we discuss, you can find links to them on sale with discount codes in the description below. Now, first things first, let's get into the design. Now, Adidas certainly did not start from scratch with this model, and if you're familiar with the previous Copa Gloro, this boot is going to take a lot of hints from that design. And of course, the most important feature of the design of this boot is going to be the full calf leather upper that's displayed all the way from the toe box around the midfoot to the back of the heel. Now, there are going to be a few aesthetic changes here and there with the design, and you can see that the stitching is actually going to be a little bit different on the Gloro 2 compared to the stitching on the Gloro 1. But more important than the change in the stitching pattern is that I actually find the leather that's used in the Gloro 2 to be slightly softer than the leather that was in the previous version. And that's actually one criticism I had with the original Gloro over here, was that although it did have that full calf leather construction, I just wanted the leather, especially towards the toe box, to feel a little bit more softer after breaking in the boots. But with the new Gloro 2, straight out of the box, these definitely have a noticeable more plush and padded feel to them. And of course, you're still gonna have that retro fold over tongue that Adidas has been popularizing recently with the new Predator model, but that new tongue actually has undergone a slight aesthetic change as well. You can see that the previous fold over tongue kind of had that cross-hatch stitching pattern on it, whereas this new fold over tongue is gonna run a little bit longer, and to me has a slightly more retro aesthetic to it. When I look at these boots, especially in the black and red colorway, I immediately get flashbacks to the earlier Predators from around 2008 to 2012. And similar to the current Predator Elite, the Gloro 2 is going to feature an elasticated strap that's attached to that tongue, so you can make sure it's secured over the lacing system. Now, another cool thing about this boot is that if you decide down the line that you actually aren't a huge fan of the fold over tongue, or if you just want a slight change of pace in terms of how the boots look, you can actually opt to cut that fold over tongue off if you just follow the dotted line at the base of the boot there. And if you want to see how the boots would look if you did remove the tongue, I can kind of just fold it back into the boot here, and you have a slightly more modern looking football boot that I think still actually looks really good. I like that Adidas have added their logo here to the top of this tongue here, so that the boots don't look out of place if you do decide to remove the tongue. All right, so now that we've talked about the leather upper and the fold over tongue, let's get into the heel area. Because although it might not be the first thing that you look at when you get a new pair of boots, the heel area, especially the heel liner, is a really important part to the overall comfort of your boots and how they're gonna be like to play in. And previously, with the original Copa Gloro here, you had a slightly cheap feeling synthetic leather liner that was around the heel area. I found it to be a little bit rigid on feet, and sometimes it resulted in my heel slipping a bit. And with the new Gloro 2, Adidas have actually completely changed up the heel liner here. It has more of a faux suede feeling to it, and it definitely feels noticeably more padded and soft to the touch. In fact, I had to pull out my pair of Nike Premier 3s for this video because the heel liner on the new Copa Gloro 2 is actually very, very similar to the soft heel liner that's on the Premier 3. It's a really soft textile material, and ultimately it's a big improvement in the overall fit of the Gloros. Now, when it comes to the sole plate, pretty much no major change here. With the new Gloro 2, you're still gonna have 11 conical studs throughout the boot. You're gonna have 4 towards the heel, and then you're gonna have 7 towards the forefoot. Now, these short to medium length studs that are on the Gloros are advertised for use on firm ground natural grass, and that's what I did test these boots on. But because these studs are relatively short and they're rounded off, I would definitely feel comfortable using these on artificial grass. And that's one reason I like picking up boots that have conical studs, because they're just going to be a little bit more versatile, and I don't have to worry about changing into a different pair, whether I'm going to be playing on turf or natural grass. And then in terms of the flex of the sole plate, I would say it's maybe on the soft side of medium, definitely not quite as firm as the sole plate you would find on the F50 here. All right, so we got all the main features out of the way. Let's talk about the fit and feel of these boots. So I'm happy to say that a lot of those small design improvements from the Copa Gloro 1 to the Copa Gloro 2 did carry over into a more comfortable fit. So the slightly softer leather towards the front of the toe box and the improved heel liner do make for a better wearing experience once you get these boots on feet. Now I picked up these boots in my standard size 10.5 US and the length was perfect. I had just under a centimeter or so of space between the edge of my toes and the front of the boots. So if you are curious about fit, I would definitely recommend going true to size. Now in terms of width, which is a question a lot of people have, these are slightly wider compared to a lot of other options from Adidas. Especially when you compare them to their other leather line, which is the Copa Pure 2, you're definitely gonna find a little bit more width out of the Copa Gloros, just because the sole plate doesn't taper quite aggressively as the torsion frame that's on the Copa Pure. However, when comparing the width of these boots across the entire market, I'd say they're relatively average, and they're still not going to be quite as wide as models like the 442 V2 Pro from New Balance. But I do find it important to note that a soft, well-made calf leather upper like this is going to stretch a little bit over time, especially towards the toe box area. And a great example of that is my Nike Premier 3s. When I first got these boots in a size 10.5, they were really snug. My toes were almost all the way to the end of these boots, and after playing them for about 2 to 3 months, I had noticeably more space at the front of the boot. And because the leather on the Gloro 2s is similar quality, I would definitely expect a little bit of stretching and the boots to mold to your feet over time. And then towards the ankle and the back of the boot, the lockdown that you get from both the lacing system and the heel area is really secure. And for me, this was definitely a small area of improvement over the previous Copa Gloro, which for some reason I just found my heel slipping out of slightly. I think it's because this heel liner is just a little bit more cushioned and a bit softer. It just does a better job at hugging my heel. Now, I also think it's worth mentioning that these aren't necessarily a really thin and minimal pair of leather football boots. They have a little bit more structure and padding to them compared to other models in the Adidas line, and that's important to know before you try them on. But overall, I was definitely happy with how comfortable these were straight out of the box. Next up, how are these boots like to play in? So at the $100 retail price for the new Copa Gloro 2, I would say that these boots pretty much aligned with my expectations when I played with them for the first time. The soft leather is going to give you a really great touch on the ball, and I would say it's highlighted best when you're dribbling or juggling, making those soft touches. I don't know what it is. I think it's just something about the natural padding you get with these traditional leather boots. I just find them really fun to juggle with. But I will say, when it comes to shooting, I actually usually prefer a boot that has a slightly thinner upper than this, just to give me a little bit more sensitivity in that split second when I'm taking a shot. Now, from top to bottom, I didn't notice any pressure points throughout the boot whatsoever, so no issues towards the toe box and nothing at the ankle or the heel area. And as far as traction is concerned, as I mentioned, I use these on firm ground natural grass, but I definitely would have no hesitation bringing these out to an AG pitch. Because these studs are conical and a little bit shorter in length, you're not going to run as much of a risk of the boots catching and causing too much traction when you're rotating on those synthetic surfaces. Now, being that the changes between the Gloro 1 and Gloro 2 were relatively small, it's no surprise that there's not a huge difference in the playing experience. But for me, the softer leather in the toe box and the improved heel liner just made these a pair of boots I'd be more likely to reach for over the originals. And one final note about the fold over tongue, while I really do love the aesthetic it gives these boots and how retro it looks with it on, after a couple months playing in a boot like this, I would probably opt to remove that fold over tongue. And as you can see, that's also the same approach I took with my Nike Premier 3. I had these for about 2 months. I was playing with the fold over tongue, and eventually I was like, all right, I want to get rid of this. Because as cool as the fold over tongue is, I actually like having a little bit more accessibility to the lacing system. And once you remove that fold over tongue, it's just a little bit easier to get the boots on and off. And I actually like how these look with it removed. But of course, at the end of the day, whether or not you want to keep the tongue, that's just going to come down to personal preference. Next up, let's talk about value. So similar to many other new releases, the price of the Copa Gloro 2 has creeped up a little bit. Because while the original Gloro was selling for around $90 full price, the Gloro 2 is starting off at a retail of $100. And we've seen similar price increases from Nike, with the Premier 3 going from $100 to $110, and now I think it stands at $120. But to be fair, I'm actually not that upset with the $10 price increase on the Copa Gloros, because when you think about it, they didn't just make this boot with a new colorway and maybe change a small design element here or there. They actually did improve the quality of the leather, and they gave a much better heel area. So considering the fact that Adidas made some notable improvements with this model, I'm not too upset with the $10 price increase. And I would personally pick the Copa Gloro 2 over some more expensive Adidas models like the Copa Pure 2 Elite and maybe even the Predator Elite. And that isn't because those other boots are necessarily bad. They may work for you, but the Gloros just happen to fit my feet a bit better. And to be honest, in today's market, it's pretty hard hard to find a football boot with a full leather upper for $100 or less, and for that reason, I think the Gloro 2 is solid value. But nevertheless, the competition at the $100 price point has been heating up, so let's talk about some other options to the Copa Gloro 2. So from Adidas themselves, I would say that the Gloro 2 is better than almost any other model they have under $100. So I think it is better than the Predator League and the Copa Pure 2 League, while I think those boots are still good value. However, there is one third tier takedown I recently reviewed that I actually think gives this boot a run for its money, and that's the F50 League. Now the F50 League is a third tier takedown boot that came out a couple months ago, and it retails for $90. And when I reviewed them, I said that they were the best boots you can get for $90, and I still stand by that. And if you ask me which one of those two boots I preferred, I'd probably slightly, just by a hair, lean towards the F50 League. So if you're looking for Adidas boots at $100 or less, I would say if you want something leather, go with the Copa Gloro 2. Then if you want something synthetic or a little bit more speed boot oriented, I would go with the F50 League. And of course, the other logical comparison with the Gloro is going to be the Nike Premier 3. Now these boots are going to have a really similar design, build quality, comfort, and price point. And that also makes them pretty hard to choose between. Now I will say that the kangaroo leather that's on the Premiers is a little bit softer than the calf leather that's on the Copas, but I did have some small durability issues with the Nike Premier 3 over time, and they ended up cracking on me just after about 2 seasons. So the Gloros may have an edge on durability, but to be fair, I just got these boots in, so I can't claim that definitively. But ultimately, they're both great leather boots around the $100 price point. You can't really go wrong with either, so at the end of the day, I would just choose whichever one you like the aesthetic of more. And finally, what about more premium leather football boots? Well, if you're willing to spend a little bit more money, you enter the territory of boots like the 442 V2 Pro from New Balance, the Mizuno Morelia 2 Elite, and the Adler Horenzo. Now these boots are all gonna have slightly higher quality leather than the Copa Gloro, and they're gonna be a bit more comfortable on feet. But they're also gonna all retail for over $150, except for the 442, which I believe goes for around $130. So if you do wanna stretch your budget for a slightly more premium leather boot, these are all great options. So what are my final thoughts on the Gloro 2? For those of you who are shopping for a comfortable and reliable leather football boot at $100 or less, I think you're going to be happy with this boot. And for those curious about the main changes between this model and the previous one, they didn't just release the same boot with a new skin, they actually made some noticeable improvements. I'm really glad this is still a boot in Adidas's lineup, and I look forward to see how they improve it in future versions. And guys, that is going to do it for this video. Let me know in the comments below if you've gotten a chance to try on these boots and what you think of them. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. It costs you nothing and it's the best way to support the channel. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will catch you in the next video.